Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Easy English Spark channel. I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today. Are you ready for another adventure? We're about to dive into a thrilling journey that will not only help you improve your English, listening and speaking skills, but also boost your confidence as you navigate through exciting and mysterious situations. Over the course of 10 chapters, we'll uncover secrets, confront twists, and discover how to speak more fluently and confidently. Let's get started and ignite your English learning journey from the comfort of your home. Chapter 1. The Curious Porter. Every day, at precisely 5 p.m., Ethan, the porter at the Grandview Hotel, would finish his shift and step out onto the bustling streets of New York City. The clatter of the hotel's heavy doors would echo behind him, but Ethan hardly noticed. He was used to it by now. His routine had been the same for years. Walk to the nearby cafe, order his coffee, and sit by the window watching the world go by. But today felt different. Today, something was going to happen. As usual, the cafe was quiet, the soothing hum of conversation and clinking of cups filling the air. Ethan moved to his usual spot by the window, a table in the corner where he had a perfect view of the street outside. He settled down and ordered his usual black coffee, a habit he'd cultivated after months of working the night shift at the hotel. But today, something caught his eye. Across the room, sitting alone at the table near the window, was a woman. She was about his age, maybe a little younger. Her features were soft, but there was something about her that intrigued him. Her long dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she gazed out of the window, lost in thought. Ethan had seen her before, many times in fact. Every afternoon, just like him, she came in around the same time. But unlike the other patrons who came and went, she always stayed, sipping her coffee, as if the world outside didn't exist. For her, it was strange. Ethan wasn't normally the type to approach people, but today, something was different. Maybe it was the way she seemed so lost, so distant. Maybe it was her air of mystery. He couldn't shake the feeling that he should talk to her. After all, he came here every day, and she came here every day. Perhaps it was fate, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, he stood up from his table and walked over to her. "Excuse me?" Ethan said, his voice a little softer than he intended. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, her green eyes meeting his for the first time. She didn't smile immediately, but there was a flicker of something in her gaze, a curiosity that mirrored his own. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sure," she said. "Why not?" Ethan sat down, feeling a little awkward, but also oddly relieved. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering a hand. "I work at the Grandview Hotel across the street." She took his hand with a firm but gentle shake. "I'm Lily," she replied. "Nice to meet you." They both sat there for a moment, neither quite knowing where to begin. Ethan didn't want to seem too forward, but he had to know. He glanced at her, then back at the window, wondering if he should say something. Finally, after a brief silence, he asked, "I've seen you here before, almost every day. What brings you to this little corner of the world?" Lily paused, taking a deep breath as if she were considering how much to reveal. "I come here to escape, I guess. It's a nice spot to sit and think. It's the only place in the city where I can really be alone with my thoughts." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she realized. He too had his reasons for coming here. "I know what you mean. Sometimes after a long shift, I just need a quiet space to clear my head." Lily studied him for a moment, as if assessing him. Then, her gaze softened. "What do you do at the hotel?" she asked, her tone more curious now. "I'm a porter," Ethan replied. "I carry bags, help with luggage, make sure everything runs smoothly. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." "Sounds like hard work," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Do you like it?" Ethan shrugged. "It's not the best job, but it's steady. I'm used to it by now." Lily looked away for a moment as if lost in thought again. Ethan watched her, wondering what was going through her mind. He knew there was more to her story than she was letting on, but he didn't press her. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee and waited for her to continue. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time. "I used to live in Boston," she said. "But things happened. I came to New York to start over. I thought it would be better here." Ethan nodded. He knew that feeling all too well. "Starting over can be hard," he said. "Sometimes you think you're leaving everything behind, but it's not that simple." Lily didn't respond immediately. She just looked out the window again, her eyes distant. Ethan could tell that there was more to the story, but he didn't want to push her. There was something fragile about her, something she wasn't ready to share. But that wasn't going to stop him from trying to get to know her better. "Do you come here often?" he asked, a little hesitant. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Every day. I don't have much else to do, just drink my coffee and think about things." Ethan smiled back, though it was a smile of understanding rather than amusement. "I come here every day, too," he said. "Maybe we're both just trying to figure things out." Lily finally smiled, a real smile this time, and Ethan felt a sense of warmth flood through him. There was something about her that made him feel like he wasn't so alone in the world. It was an odd connection, one that felt both comforting and unsettling at the same time. They sat there for a while, talking about the little things, the city, the weather, their favorite coffee blends. But deep down, Ethan knew there was more to her story than she was telling. And as much as he tried to ignore the nagging feeling, he couldn't shake the sense that this meeting was the beginning of something much bigger. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan reluctantly got up to leave. He knew he had to go back to work soon. "I have to head back," he said. "But it was nice talking to you, Lily." She stood up as well, looking at him with an expression that seemed almost relieved. "It was nice talking to you too, Ethan." As he walked out of the cafe, Ethan couldn't help but feel that he had just scratched the surface of something much deeper. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he was certain that Lily's life was more complicated than she let on. And somehow, in the back of his mind, Ethan felt like he would be hearing from her again soon. Chapter 2. The Plan to Retrieve the Art. The next day, as the afternoon sunlight streamed through the large windows of the Grandview Hotel, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Lily. The brief conversation they had shared the day before stayed with him, like a lingering echo in his mind. He found himself returning to the same table at the cafe, hoping to see her again. But as the hours passed, she didn't appear. He couldn't help but feel disappointed, but he knew it wasn't the end. Something inside him told him their paths would cross again. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to find Mike, one of the hotel's security guards, standing behind him with a puzzled expression. "You look lost in thought, my friend," Mike said, taking a seat at the table without waiting for an invitation. He had a dry sense of humor, something that Ethan had always appreciated. "I guess I'm just thinking about work," Ethan replied with a half smile. "Same old routine?" Mike gave him a knowing look. "It's not just work that's on your mind, is it?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He didn't feel like discussing his personal life, but Mike had always been able to see right through him. "I met someone yesterday," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Her name is Lily." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Ah, I see. A bit of romance, huh? Tell me more." Ethan hesitated, unsure if he should reveal too much. But Mike's interest seemed genuine, so he decided to tell him about Lily. "She comes to the cafe across the street every day. She's mysterious, I guess. She's an artist, and she's staying at a hotel nearby. She doesn't talk much, but something about her, I don't know. There's just something there." Mike leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. "Sounds intriguing, but I can tell there's more to it. You're not here just to talk about a pretty face. What's the catch?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He knew what Mike was hinting at, but he didn't want to speak too soon. "She's got a problem," Ethan said slowly. "Her stepfather is staying at the Grandview, and she says he's taken something important from her. Her sketchbooks. She wants me to get them back for her. Mike's eyes narrowed, his expression suddenly serious. So you're planning on breaking into a guest's room? Ethan winced, uncomfortable with how that sounded. I didn't think of it that way, but yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing. Mike let out a long sigh, rubbing his temple. Ethan, you're always getting involved in things you don't fully understand. You've got to be careful. The Grandview is a fancy hotel with high-profile guests. Getting caught in something like this could mean more than just losing your job. I know, Ethan replied, his voice quiet. But she's in trouble, Mike. I don't want to let her down. Mike stared at him for a long moment before nodding. All right. But just make sure you know what you're getting into. The last thing you want is to get yourself tangled in something bigger than you can handle. Ethan appreciated Mike's concern, but he knew he had already made up his mind. He had already agreed to help Lily, and he wasn't about to back out. Now, I'll be careful, Ethan assured him, though doubt gnawed at him. I'll find a way to get the sketchbooks without anyone noticing. That evening, after his shift, Ethan found himself walking to the hotel with a mix of excitement and unease. He had agreed to meet Lily again at the cafe, and he couldn't wait to hear more about her plan. As he approached the cafe, he noticed Lily sitting at her usual table, her head lowered, her eyes focused on the coffee in front of her. The moment she noticed Ethan, her expression softened, and she smiled at him, a little shy but genuine. Hey, Ethan said, sitting down opposite her. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Lily nodded, her fingers absent-mindedly, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure if you would. Ethan smiled. I couldn't stay away, but I need to know more about your plan. You said you wanted me to get your sketchbooks back from your stepfather. How do we make this happen? Lily's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Ethan noticed how tense she looked. She glanced around the cafe to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in closer. I don't know if I should be telling you this, she said in a low voice. But there's more to this than just my sketchbooks. My stepfather, Michael, he's not who he says he is. I've seen him meeting with people I don't trust. I think they've been using him, maybe even using me. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What's going on? Lily took a deep breath, looking like she was wrestling with whether or not to continue. Finally, she spoke. My stepfather works for a group of art thieves. He's been in the business for years, and I had no idea. When I was younger, he always told me he was working on a big project, but he never told me what it was. He's been hiding something from me, and I only found out recently. That's why I need those sketchbooks. They're not just important to me. They're important to the people he's working for. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about getting back a few sketchbooks. This was something much bigger, something dangerous. So, your stepfather is involved in something criminal? He asked, his voice tight. Yes, Lily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And I don't want to be involved in any of it. That's why I need your help. I can't get the sketchbooks myself. He's too protective of them, but I know they're important, and I'm sure they're worth a lot of money. Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing everything she had just said. This wasn't just a small favor he was doing for a woman he had just met. This was an opportunity to help someone trapped in a web of lies and danger. He couldn't back out now. All right, Ethan said, his decision made. I'll do it. I'll get the sketchbooks for you. Lily's face brightened and she looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, Ethan. You don't know how much this means to me. We'll meet tomorrow afternoon like we planned. Ethan replied, already mentally preparing for what he would have to do to get into room 724 and retrieve the sketchbooks without anyone noticing. The next day, as the clock struck 4:30, Ethan was standing in front of the Grandview Hotel, waiting for Lily. He had spent the day thinking about her stepfather, Michael, and the dangerous game he was about to play. Breaking into a hotel room wasn't something he had ever done before, and he didn't want to get caught. As he waited, his mind kept racing. He had to act quickly and quietly. The hotel was busy, as always, and there were cameras everywhere. It wouldn't be easy, but Ethan had done his share of sneaking around. He had the experience to pull it off. All he needed was the right opportunity. At that moment, Lily arrived, her face a mix of hope and concern. She looked around nervously before walking up to Ethan. Are you ready? She asked. Ethan nodded. Let's do this. Together, they walked into the hotel, past the front desk, and toward the service hallway where Ethan knew he would be able to access the guest rooms. As they moved deeper into the hotel, the weight of what they were about to do settled over him. There was no turning back now. Chapter 3. The Hidden Room. The night was cold and damp as Ethan waited in the shadows just outside the service entrance of the Grandview Hotel. His heart raced with anticipation and fear. It wasn't just the thrill of breaking into a hotel room that made his pulse quicken. It was the sense of danger. He was getting involved in something much larger than he had imagined, and the weight of it hung heavily on his shoulders. The plan was simple. Ethan would sneak into room 724 while the housekeeper was busy cleaning other rooms. With luck, he'd get in, find the sketchbooks, and be gone before anyone noticed. He wasn't sure how Lily's stepfather would react, but he knew it wouldn't be good if he were caught. Michael Russo wasn't just any guest. He was connected to a dangerous group, a network of art thieves who dealt in stolen works of art and rare treasures. It was becoming clearer to Ethan that Lily's stepfather wasn't just a business professional, he was a criminal. As he watched the hotel's entrance, Ethan's thoughts kept circling back to Lily. What had she really gotten herself into? And why had she chosen him to help her? She was smart. She could have gone to the police, but instead, she had chosen to trust him. That trust made him feel more responsible than ever. Ethan had no intention of letting her down. He couldn't. Not when she was so vulnerable, so caught up in the web of lies and danger that surrounded her. A flash of movement caught his eye. It was the housekeeper, pushing a cart with clean towels and sheets. She walked briskly down the hallway, pausing outside room 723. Perfect. Ethan didn't waste any time. He slipped through the door before it closed completely, entering the service hallway where the rooms were located. His steps were light and swift. There was no turning back now. Room 724 was just a few doors down. As he approached, Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. He was about to cross a line, to step into a world that was far darker than he could have imagined. But he pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. The door was ajar, just as he had hoped. Slowly, he pushed it open, being careful not to make any noise. The room was quiet, dimly lit by the soft glow of the table lamps. Ethan's eyes immediately scanned the space, looking for any sign of the sketchbooks. The bed was neatly made, and a few personal items were scattered across the nightstand. But there was nothing that looked out of the ordinary. Ethan's gaze landed on the dresser across the room. He moved toward it, his heart pounding in his chest. The drawer was slightly open. He pulled it out cautiously, and there, at the back, were the sketchbooks. His pulse quickened as he pulled them out, feeling the thick weight of the leather-bound covers. These were it. The ones that Lily had asked him to retrieve. He was about to slip them into his bag when a noise from the hallway made him freeze. His blood ran cold as he heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through him. He quickly shoved the sketchbooks back into the drawer and closed it, just as the footsteps stopped outside the door. For a moment, everything was still. Ethan held his breath, praying that whoever it was would walk away. He couldn't afford to get caught. Not now. The door opened, and in stepped a figure Ethan hadn't expected. It was Michael Russo, Lily's stepfather, the man who had been staying at the hotel, the one who held the keys to the mystery. Ethan's heart raced as Michael glanced around the room, not seeming to notice Ethan standing near the dresser. Michael's sharp eyes locked onto the drawer, and for a brief moment, Ethan thought the worst. But then Michael moved to the window and began to gaze out at the city. He seemed distracted, lost in thought. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for the brief moment of luck. Ethan didn't waste any more time. He knew he had to get out of there before Michael turned back around. He backed slowly toward the door, keeping his eyes fixed on Michael, waiting for the perfect moment to slip out undetected. Just as he reached for the door handle, his foot brushed against something on the floor. A small metallic object, a pen, rolled across the floor, making a soft clicking sound. Michael turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What's this?" he muttered, walking toward the noise. Ethan's mind raced. He had no choice now. He opened the door quickly and slipped out into the hallway, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He could hear Michael's footsteps behind him, but he didn't dare turn around. He needed to get back to the service entrance before anyone saw him. Ethan sprinted through the hallway, keeping to the shadows. He didn't stop until he reached the service entrance again. He pushed the door open and stepped into the alley behind the hotel, his chest heaving. He leaned against the wall, taking a moment to collect himself. He had the sketchbooks. He'd done it. But something felt off. The whole situation felt more dangerous than he had imagined. As he made his way back to the cafe to meet Lily, his mind raced. What had Michael been doing in the room? Was he on to him? And if so, what was his next move? Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just scratched the surface of something much bigger. He needed to find Lily. He needed answers. When Ethan reached the cafe, Lily was already waiting for him at their usual table. She was looking out the window, but her gaze softened when she saw him enter. She stood up quickly, a look of concern in her eyes. "You got them?" she asked, her voice a little more frantic than usual. Ethan nodded, pulling the sketchbooks out of his bag. "I got them. But there's more to this than I thought, Lily. I don't think your stepfather is just a businessman. There's something else going on here." Lily's face paled as she took the sketchbooks from him. "What do you mean?" "I think he's involved in something much bigger. There was a man in the room with him when I was there. I don't know who he was, but he seemed suspicious. And your stepfather, he's not acting like a regular hotel guest. There's something he's hiding." Lily glanced down at the sketchbooks in her hands. "I had a feeling, but I didn't want to believe it. I don't think he'll let you leave this situation so easily," Ethan warned. "You need to be careful, and we need a plan. I don't know if I can keep doing this without knowing more." Lily nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We'll figure it out. I won't let him control me anymore." Ethan knew this was just the beginning. The hidden room, the sketchbooks, it was all connected to something much darker. And as they sat there discussing their next steps, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were in deeper than either of them had realized. Chapter 4: The Confession. The dim glow of the cafe's hanging lights flickered above Ethan and Lily as they sat together, the air thick with tension. The sketchbooks, still in Lily's hands, felt heavier now than they ever had before. Ethan watched as her fingers traced the edges of the leather covers, as if searching for some kind of reassurance that the nightmare would end soon. But he knew better. This was just the beginning. They were both caught in a tangled web that was tightening. With each passing moment, Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his face etched with concern. "Lily?" he said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "We need to talk." Lily looked up, her green eyes soft but filled with confusion. She'd been staring at the sketchbook so intently, almost as if she was lost in thought, but Ethan's voice brought her back to the present. "What do you mean? We've already got the sketchbooks. What else is there to say?" Ethan sighed. He could see the unease in her expression, the hope in her eyes that everything would just fall into place. But it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just about getting the sketchbooks back from her stepfather. They had only uncovered a tiny fraction of the truth, and he knew the full story was much more dangerous than either of them realized. "It's about your stepfather, Michael," Ethan continued. "Something's off. When I was in his room, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone, someone he didn't want me to hear, and the man who was with him. He wasn't just a guest or an employee. It was like he was there on some other business. And I'm starting to think your stepfather is involved in something more dangerous." Lily's face paled at Ethan's words. She looked down at the sketchbooks again, her fingers now trembling, as she held them in her lap. She didn't respond immediately, but Ethan could see the wheels turning in her mind. He could see the way she was trying to process everything, the way she was piecing together the jumbled puzzle of her life. "Michael's been hiding things from me," Lily said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "I always knew something wasn't right, but I didn't want to believe it." Ethan nodded. He'd suspected as much. "Lily, what exactly do you know about him? About his past? What's really going on here?" Lily swallowed hard, then slowly closed her eyes as if bracing herself for something painful. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice shaking with the weight of the confession she was about to make. "Michael's not just my stepfather. He's not even really my stepfather," she said, her voice trembling with each word. "His real name is Victor Hargrave. He's not a businessman like he's told everyone. He's a criminal, a member of a group of art thieves. They specialize in stealing rare and priceless artwork, and Michael, Victor, he's one of their top guys. He's the one who arranges the deals, who gets the art out of the country and into private collections." Ethan sat back, stunned. He had suspected something dark about Michael, but this was beyond what he had imagined. The truth was worse than he thought. His mind raced as he processed the information Lily had just shared. If Michael Hargrave was really part of a criminal organization, then everything they had done so far had been part of something much larger, much more dangerous. They weren't just dealing with a couple of stolen sketchbooks. They were tangled up in a web of crime and deceit, and it was closing in on them. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she continued. I found out a few months ago when I saw a document on his desk. It had pictures of art that I didn't recognize, names of buyers I'd never heard of. I confronted him, but he just lied and said it was nothing. But after that, I started seeing the signs. I started seeing the same names come up again and again. Art dealers, gallery owners, people who were involved in shady deals. I tried to look into it more, but every time I got close, he would stop me. He'd get angry. He'd shut me out. I started to feel trapped. Ethan reached across the table and placed a hand on hers, offering her a small, supportive squeeze. Lily, I'm so sorry. This is a lot to carry, and you don't have to go through this alone. We'll figure this out together. Lily gave him a weak smile, grateful for his support. But there was a deep sadness in her eyes, a sense of hopelessness that she couldn't hide. The thing is, Ethan, she said, her voice growing quieter, I don't know what to do anymore. I've been living with this lie for so long, and now, with the sketchbooks, I feel like everything's coming to a head. I thought I could get away from all of this, but now it's all back. I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know who to trust. Ethan's heart broke for her. He could see how much pain she was in, how conflicted she felt. She had been living under the shadow of her stepfather's secrets for so long. And now that she had the truth, she didn't know how to face it. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. Listen to me, Lily, Ethan said, his voice firm but gentle. We've come this far and we're not backing down now. I know you're scared. I know you're worried about what might happen next, but we're going to stop him. We're going to stop this whole thing from spiraling out of control. You've got the sketchbooks. You've got the evidence. And together, we'll make sure your stepfather doesn't get away with this. Lily wiped the tears from her eyes, her expression hardening with determination. You're right. I won't let him get away with it. I'm not going back to that life. I'm not going to let him keep me under his thumb any longer. Ethan nodded, proud of her strength. He could see the fire returning in her eyes, the resolve to take control of her own future. This wasn't just about the sketchbooks anymore. It was about breaking free from a life of lies, of manipulation, of fear. Lily was reclaiming her power, and Ethan would be there to help her, no matter what it took. As they sat there in the quiet of the cafe, the weight of the confession hanging in the air, they both knew the path ahead would be dangerous. They were in deeper than they had ever imagined. But one thing was certain. Together, they would face whatever came next. And no matter how dark the road ahead might seem, they would never stop fighting for the truth. Chapter 5. The Twist. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the strange look in Lily's eyes as she had handed him the sketchbooks. She had looked at him as if there was something more to say, something she wasn't telling him. It had been a quick exchange, as if the weight of her secret had pushed her to move faster than her thoughts could catch up. Now, as Ethan sat in the small, dimly lit office of his apartment, a sense of foreboding crept in, despite the heavy relief he felt for retrieving the precious books. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a striped shadow across his desk. He had spent hours studying the sketches inside, marveling at their quality, their intricate detail. But something about them didn't sit right with him. The subjects of the drawings, familiar faces, beautiful landscapes, and abstract designs seemed too perfect, too deliberate. They were artful, yes, but they lacked the personal touch he had come to expect from someone as talented as Lily. It was as though they had been meant for something far more than just personal expression. Ethan stood up and walked to the window, glancing out over the city. His mind was racing. Why had Lily's stepfather left the books with her? Why had she hidden them for so long, only to let Ethan retrieve them? What was her connection to all of this? What was really happening? There was a sudden knock at the door, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone. His first instinct was to ignore it, but something inside him, some inexplicable feeling, told him to open it. When he opened the door, it wasn't Lily standing there, but someone he hadn't seen before. The man was tall, dressed in a crisp black suit, and his face was as cold as the ice-cold look in his eyes. "You must be Ethan," the man said, his voice smooth, yet carrying an edge of something darker. "We need to talk." Ethan froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he glanced past Ethan, looking into the apartment as though evaluating something unseen. Then he spoke again. "I believe you've gotten yourself involved in something much larger than you realize." Ethan's heart began to race. "What do you want?" "I want to help you understand the situation before it's too late," the man said, his voice lowering. "But you have to listen. You've been caught in a web, Ethan. A web that's been spinning long before you even met Lily." Ethan narrowed his eyes, sensing the dangerous game unfolding in front of him. "What's this all about?" The man stepped into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, his shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. He looked around, assessing everything in a way that made Ethan feel suddenly exposed. The air grew thick with tension. "The sketchbooks you've been so eager to help Lily retrieve," the man said, his voice cold and deliberate. "They're not just any collection of drawings. They are the key to a much larger mystery. The truth about them and about Lily's family will change everything you thought you knew." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" The man paused, then turned to face him with a calm intensity that made Ethan's skin crawl. "Lily's stepfather, Jake Russo, is not who you think he is. The man is a criminal. Mastermind, Ethan. And those sketchbooks? They contain much more than art. They hold the blueprint to a hidden fortune, one that's been passed down for generations, a fortune that will bring power to whoever controls it." Ethan's stomach twisted. "A hidden fortune?" he repeated, barely able to process the words. "What does that have to do with Lily?" The man leaned forward slightly. "Everything. Lily's family has been hiding the truth from her, keeping her in the dark about the legacy she's inherited. The sketchbooks were never just about her talent as an artist. They were a carefully crafted map, a guide to a fortune that has been buried for years. And now, you've become a part of it, whether you realize it or not." Ethan stepped back, trying to make sense of the storm of thoughts in his mind. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" The man's expression didn't change, but there was a glint of something dangerous in his eyes. "I want you to understand that your involvement with Lily, with the sketchbooks, is no accident. There are forces at play that you can't begin to comprehend. If you stay involved, you'll be putting yourself and Lily into far greater danger than you can imagine. There are people who will stop at nothing to get those books, Ethan." The weight of the man's words pressed down on Ethan's chest, suffocating him. His mind spun with the implications, trying to wrap around the idea that the sketchbooks held a secret so valuable that it could shift the balance of power. "But why would Lily have given me the books?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky. The man's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Lily didn't give you the books, Ethan. You took them. You walked right into a trap set by someone much more powerful. Then you realize. And now, you're the one holding the key to a treasure that could change everything." Ethan's thoughts raced. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but they weren't forming the image he had expected. Lily, the sketchbooks, her stepfather, everything was tied together in ways he hadn't anticipated. "What do I do now?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "You need to leave. Get as far away from Lily as possible. Return the sketchbooks to the people who know how to handle them. If you don't, you'll find yourself in the middle of a deadly game, one that you won't be able to win." Ethan was speechless, the weight of the man's words sinking in. The world he thought he understood was slipping through his fingers. Everything had been a lie, and now he didn't know who to trust or what was real anymore. But there was one thing he knew for certain. He had to make a choice. He could either walk away, or he could continue this dangerous game and uncover the truth about Lily, her stepfather, and the fortune that lay hidden in the sketchbooks. The twist in his life had come suddenly and without warning, and now Ethan was standing at a crossroads. The path ahead would either lead to freedom or to his undoing. And Lily? She was the key to everything, whether she knew it or not. Chapter 6. On the Run. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood in the doorway, his mind racing faster than his body could move. The man in the black suit, whoever he was, had just told him everything Ethan thought he knew was a lie. The sketchbooks, Lily, Jake Russo. Nothing was what it seemed. But what was worse was the cold, hard truth that Ethan now had to face. He was in the middle of something much bigger than himself. The man's words echoed in his ears, a warning he couldn't ignore. "You need to leave. Get as far away from Lily as possible. Return the sketchbooks to the people who know how to handle them. If you don't, you'll find yourself in the middle of a deadly game, one that you won't be able to win." Ethan had always thought of himself as an ordinary man, a simple porter at a hotel, a guy who lived his life by routines. But in the past few days, his world had been turned upside down. And now, he was about to be swept into something that could cost him everything. His legs moved before he could make sense of his thoughts, propelling him toward the door of his apartment. As he stepped into the hallway, he felt the chill of the cold air on his skin, the weight of the decision already pressing on him. He didn't know what to believe anymore, whether Lily was truly a part of the scheme or if she was just as much a victim as he was. But one thing was certain. He couldn't trust anyone. The city outside seemed different, almost foreign, as Ethan stepped out into the street. His footsteps felt heavier, as if the very ground beneath him was warning him to stop, to turn back. But there was no turning back now. His mind was set. The danger was already here. He needed to leave. He needed to get away from Lily, from the sketchbooks, from the mess he had inadvertently walked into. Ethan quickly made his way to the subway station, his pace quickening as he moved through the crowd. He couldn't risk anyone recognizing him, couldn't risk anyone asking questions about the events of the past few days. He had become a target, a man on the run, and he knew that any wrong move could lead to disaster. He stepped onto the platform, his heart racing as he looked around to make sure no one was following him. The train doors opened, and Ethan slipped into the nearest car, blending in with the commuters around him. He tried to calm his breathing, tried to quiet the frantic thoughts swirling in his head. Where would he go? How would he escape this web of lies and danger? He couldn't go back to his apartment. Not now. Not with the police possibly waiting for him. The man at his door, the one who had warned him, was right. He was involved in something much larger than he could have ever imagined, and his best chance of survival was to disappear. As the train began to move, Ethan's thoughts turned to Lily. He had wanted to trust her, wanted to believe that she was just another innocent caught up in her stepfather's dark world. But now, he wasn't sure of anything anymore. The sketchbooks were more than just art. They were the key to a hidden fortune, one that people would kill to possess. He needed answers. He needed to know what the sketchbooks were really about, what Jake Russo's connection to them was, and why Lily had been the one to take them. But most of all, he needed to get out of New York and away from everything he had just learned. The danger was too great to ignore. The game was no longer just about art. It was about survival. The train's stop sounded in the distance, pulling Ethan back to the present. He was nearing his destination, but he wasn't sure what he was walking into. Every moment felt like a countdown to something he couldn't control. As the train doors opened, Ethan stepped off the platform and walked out into the night, blending with the crowd. His every step felt like a calculated risk. He didn't know if anyone was watching him, if anyone had been following him since his encounter with the man in black, but he couldn't afford to look back. He had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of whoever was after him. The streets of New York were alive with noise, the sound of traffic and chatter filling the air. But for Ethan, the city felt strangely quiet. He was on his own now, separated from everything he had known, thrust into a world that was nothing like the one he had lived in before. He ducked into a small alley, checking behind him to make sure no one had followed. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of danger. There was no one, at least not visibly. But the feeling of being hunted was palpable, like a shadow lurking just behind him. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly as he unlocked it. His fingers hovered over the screen as he debated his next move. He couldn't risk calling anyone, not now. The fewer people who knew where he was, the better. The only thing he could do was keep moving, keep running until he found a way to get out of the city and out of this mess. His phone buzzed, a message from Mike lighting up the screen. Ethan stared at it for a moment, unsure of whether or not to read it. But he couldn't ignore it. Mike was the only one who knew what was happening, or at least what Ethan had told him. If there was anyone who might have a way out of this, it was Mike. Ethan opened the message and quickly scanned it. "You're in deeper than I thought, man. You need to lay low. They're watching you. Don't trust anyone. I know someone who can help. Meet me at the docks. Pier 5. 1 a.m. Ethan's mind raced. The docks. It was risky. Too risky. But Mike was the only one who could possibly offer him a way out. Ethan couldn't afford to turn down the chance, even if it was dangerous. He didn't have a choice. Ethan shoved his phone back into his pocket and set off toward the docks, his footsteps quick and sure. Every moment felt like it might be his last, but there was no turning back now. His life had already taken a dark turn, and the only way to survive was to trust the people he could trust and keep running. As he walked, the city around him grew darker, the shadows stretching longer, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan realized that there was no way to know who his friends were and who his enemies had become. But at least for now, he had one lead, one chance to escape. And he wasn't about to let it slip away. Chapter 7. The Search for Answers. Ethan's heart raced as he walked briskly down the deserted street, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the early morning silence. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. The meeting with Mike at Pier 5 had been his only option, but as he approached the docks, doubt began to creep into his mind. What if this was a trap? What if Mike had betrayed him, and now he was walking into a place full of people who wanted him dead? He shook the thought from his mind. He couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. He had come this far, and there was no turning back. The answers he needed, answers about the sketchbooks, Lily, and the dark world they were both tangled in, were just beyond his reach, and he had to find them before it was too late. The docks were eerily quiet as he walked, past the row of rusted warehouses, their metal doors creaking with every gust of wind. The pier, a place that had once been a bustling hub of activity, now seemed abandoned, like a forgotten corner of the city. The air smelled of salt and decay, the faint sound of water slapping against the docks, the only noise in the stillness. Ethan's eyes scanned the surroundings. There was no sign of Mike, no one in sight. He checked his watch. It was 1:15 a.m. Maybe Mike was late, or maybe he had already left. Ethan felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. Every minute felt like an eternity, and with each passing second, he could feel the weight of the sketchbooks in his bag growing heavier. He glanced around once more, his eyes flicking between the dark corners of the docks. There was no sign of life, except for a single figure standing near the far end of the pier, partially obscured by the shadows of a large shipping crate. Ethan's instincts told him this was Mike, but something didn't feel right. "Mike?" Ethan called softly, his voice low, as if not wanting to disturb the dead silence around him. The figure didn't move. Ethan's hand instinctively gripped the bag slung over his shoulder, the sketchbooks pressing against his side like a ticking time bomb. He took a step forward, his heart thumping in his chest, and called again, louder this time. "Mike, is that you?" Still, there was no response. Ethan narrowed his eyes, taking slow, cautious steps toward the figure. The closer he got, the more his doubts grew. The person standing there had their back turned, and from this distance, Ethan couldn't make out any details, just the outline of a figure standing motionless in the shadows. Another few steps, and he was close enough to make out the details. The figure was wearing a long coat, its dark color blending with the night. But as Ethan moved closer, something clicked in his mind. The way the figure stood, rigid and unflinching, didn't feel like Mike. It was as if the person was waiting for him to approach. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Mike?" he asked again, now closer, his voice shaking with uncertainty. "Are you—" Before he could finish, the figure turned sharply, its face emerging from the darkness. It wasn't Mike. Ethan froze. A man stood before him, his expression cold and calculating, the dim light reflecting off his sharp features. He was tall, with short-cropped dark hair and a weathered face. But what made Ethan's blood run cold were the eyes, dark, unblinking, and utterly devoid of emotion. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as recognition slowly dawned on him. This was no ordinary person. This was one of the men who had been after the sketchbooks, the ones who had been following him, the ones who had set everything in motion. "I was wondering when you'd show up," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "You're a little late, aren't you?" Ethan's heart raced as he took a step back, his mind racing for an escape route. He needed to get away, fast. But his body felt frozen in place, his instincts screaming that if he didn't act now, he wouldn't get another chance. "What do you want?" Ethan managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper, as he searched the area for any sign of Mike, or anyone who could help him. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing with cold amusement. "I think you know what we want, Ethan. You've been running around like a mouse, trying to find answers, trying to escape. But you're in deep now, and you're not getting out." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. This was it. He was trapped. But then, just as the man took another step forward, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind. Ethan turned sharply, relief flooding his body as he saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Mike. "You're not going anywhere, Ethan," Mike said, his voice firm. He wasn't alone. There were two other men behind him, one holding a gun, the other with a sinister grin on his face. Ethan's stomach dropped as he realized the gravity of the situation. Mike wasn't here to help him. He was part of the trap. Mike, what the hell is going on? Ethan demanded, his voice trembling. He couldn't believe what was happening. Mike, the man he had trusted, the one who had warned him, was in on it the whole time. Mike shrugged nonchalantly. It's nothing personal, Ethan. You just got caught in something bigger than you can handle. You should have stayed away from Lily, from the sketchbooks. But now... He paused, glancing at the two men behind him. Now, we're going to make sure you don't get in the way of our plan. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. But every exit was blocked. Every possibility closed off. The sketchbooks were still in his bag, still holding the key to whatever twisted game they were playing. He couldn't let them fall into the wrong hands, but he also couldn't risk his life to stop them. There had to be a way out. Look, Ethan said, his voice suddenly calm, almost too calm. I don't know what you're involved in, but this isn't me. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want the sketchbooks. But if you want them, take them. I'm done. The man who had first spoken, the one with the cold eyes, stepped forward. You think it's that simple? You think you can just walk away from this? Ethan's heart raced as he realized that maybe, just maybe, he was saying the wrong things. This wasn't the way to get out of this mess. His mind whirled with panic as the man with the gun took a step closer. But then, just as it seemed like there was no hope left, a loud bang sounded from behind them. The men froze. Ethan turned, his eyes widening in surprise as a figure stepped out from the shadows. A figure he hadn't expected. It was Lily. Her eyes locked on his, and for a split second everything went still. Lily? Ethan breathed, his voice full of disbelief. Lily smiled faintly, her hand still gripping the gun she had just fired. I thought you might need a hand, she said softly. The tension in the air shifted, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. But as he looked around, the reality of the situation sank in. Lily wasn't here to save him. She had come to finish what they had started. Everything had changed again, and now, with the gun in Lily's hand, Ethan realized that the search for answers was far from over. Chapter 8. The Boat Ride. The dim light of the morning had barely touched the horizon when Ethan found himself standing at the edge of the water, the faint smell of salt in the air. The dock was empty, save for the creaking of old wooden planks beneath his boots and the sound of the waves gently slapping against the hull of a small boat. A thick mist lingered over the water, hanging like a veil, distorting the view of the city in the distance. Ethan's mind raced, his thoughts still swirling from the events of the night before, the conversation with Lily, and the bitter truth that had been revealed to him. He hadn't expected this. A boat ride in the early hours of the morning with no clear destination. But what other choice did he have? He glanced at Lily, who was standing a few feet away, her figure shadowed in the fog. She had said little since the moment she pulled him away from the dangerous confrontation at the docks. And now, as she prepared the boat, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mixture of confusion and reluctant trust. The last time he'd seen Lily, they had been on opposing sides. Now she was the one leading him, pulling him deeper into a situation that felt more and more like quicksand with each passing second. "Are you coming or not?" Lily's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it, as if the decision had already been made for him. She didn't turn to face him as she untied the boat from the dock, her hands moving with practiced ease, making the task seem effortless. Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but the way Lily acted, the way she seemed to be in control of everything, unsettled him. He had followed her all this way, and now it seemed that he had no choice but to follow her further into whatever game she was playing. He stepped onto the boat, his boots heavy on the wooden deck, and took a seat across from her. As the boat rocked slightly in the water, a chill ran down his spine. The mist still hung thick in the air, and the skyline of the city was barely visible, shrouded in the early morning haze. Lily finally turned to look at him, her face unreadable. "You still don't get it, do you?" she asked, her voice low. "None of this is about the money. None of it is about the sketchbooks." Ethan frowned, the confusion in his chest growing. Then what is it about? He had asked himself the same question countless times since he first became entangled in this mess. He had thought it was just about the art, the fame, the money. But now, as he looked at Lily's face, it was clear that there was something far more sinister going on. Lily's gaze softened for a moment, her eyes flickering briefly with something that almost looked like regret. But then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. "It's about power," she said simply. "It always has been." Ethan let the word sink in. Power. It made sense. The people after the sketchbooks, the ones who were willing to kill, for them, weren't interested in art for the sake of art. They wanted control, the kind of power that could shift entire industries, entire countries. And he had been dragged into the middle of it all, playing the pawn in a much larger game than he had ever imagined. "So, why bring me into this?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with frustration. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the sides of the boat, his knuckles white. "You could have left me out of it. Why make me part of your plan?" Lily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she focused on steering the boat through the fog, her hands steady on the oars as they drifted. Further from the dock, the silence between them grew heavy, the only sound the occasional creak of the boat and the gentle lapping of water against its sides. The boat seemed to glide effortlessly through the mist, as if it was moving toward something. But Ethan wasn't sure what that something was. "I didn't want you involved," Lily said finally, her voice soft. "But you were the only one who could help. You were the only one who could get close enough to the sketchbooks." She glanced at him, her eyes searching his face as if weighing something. "And I needed someone to trust. Someone who wasn't involved in all this mess." Ethan's mind raced. "So, you used me?" he asked, the bitterness creeping into his voice. "You dragged me into this, got me to steal for you, and now you're telling me I'm the only one you could trust?" Lily didn't flinch. Her expression remained unchanged as she guided the boat smoothly through the water. "That's not what I'm saying," she replied evenly. "I'm saying that I didn't have a choice. You were the only one who could get close to them. You were the only one who could pull this off." Ethan shook his head. "And now what? You're taking me out into the middle of nowhere, and you expect me to keep playing along? I don't know what's going on anymore, Lily." She paused, her gaze flicking back to the mist ahead. The boat was nearing the edge of the water, where the mist seemed to part, revealing a small inlet nestled between towering rocks. "You don't need to know everything, Ethan," she said quietly. "Not yet. Just trust me. There's more at stake here than you realize." They drifted in silence for a few moments, the boat cutting through the fog as if it were heading toward a destination unknown. Ethan didn't know where they were going or what they would find when they got there. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. The boat began to slow, and Ethan saw the faint outline of a small dock up ahead. There was a building nearby, its silhouette barely visible in the haze. As they drew closer, the shape of a warehouse or a storage facility came into view. It seemed out of place, standing there on the edge of the water, as if it had been abandoned for years. "What is this place?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Lily didn't answer at first. She simply reached for a rope and tied the boat to a post, then stood up and jumped out onto the dock. "It's where everything changes," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Where we find the answers." Ethan stood slowly, his legs feeling unsteady as he stepped out of the boat and onto the dock. The mist was even thicker here, making it difficult to see more than a few feet in front of him. The warehouse loomed ahead, its dark windows reflecting the faint light of the early morning. "What do you mean?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "What answers?" Lily turned to face him, her face serious now, the mask of calm gone. "You wanted answers, Ethan. Well, this is where you'll get them. The sketchbooks aren't just a way to make money. They're the key to something much bigger. Something that you need to understand before it's too late." Ethan swallowed, a sense of dread building in his chest. The answers he sought were just ahead, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay inside that dark building. Something told him that the truth would be even more dangerous than he had imagined. As they walked toward the warehouse, Ethan's thoughts swirled in confusion. The fog pressed in around him, and with each step he took, the weight of the situation grew heavier. There was no turning back now. The answers, the secrets, everything he had been searching for were within his reach. But at what cost? The door to the warehouse creaked open with a loud groan as Lily pushed it open, and they both stepped inside. Ethan could barely make out anything in the dim light, but the shadows in the corners seemed to hold something waiting for them. What was inside, Ethan didn't know, but one thing was certain. He was about to find out. The search for answers had only just begun. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The air inside the warehouse felt thick and suffocating. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the walls, and the sound of their footsteps echoed through the space, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Ethan's heart raced in his chest as he followed Lily deeper into the building, each step feeling like a step closer to something he couldn't yet comprehend. Every instinct inside him screamed to turn back, to walk away from whatever was nigh, waiting for them in the darkness, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when the truth was so close. Lily led the way with purpose, her steps quick and confident. She seemed unaffected by the oppressive silence around them, but Ethan couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in his gut. He had trusted her, up until this point, but with every passing second, the weight of their situation grew heavier. The sketchbooks, the dangerous people they had crossed paths with, the lies that had been told, it was all coming to a head, and Ethan had no idea how it would end. They reached the back of the warehouse, where a large metal door stood ominously in front of them. It was different from the other doors they had passed. This one seemed to be locked, protected by a thick chain that looped through the handle. It looked like something important was behind it. Lily stopped in front of the door and turned to face him. "This is it," she said quietly, her eyes locking with Ethan's. "The answers are behind this door, but you need to understand everything we've been through, everything that's happened. None of it has been by accident. It's all led to this moment." Ethan swallowed hard. The air was getting even thicker, and the sense of finality in her voice sent a shiver down his spine. "What do you mean? What's behind this door, Lily?" Lily didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved toward the door and began to undo the chain, the soft clink of the metal ringing out in the silence. She seemed calm, almost too calm, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly as she worked. After a few moments, the chain fell away, and the door creaked open. The room beyond was completely dark. Ethan could barely make out anything in the shadows, but there was an unmistakable heaviness in the air. It was as if the room had been waiting for them, a trap set for the moment they would step inside. Lily stepped in first, and Ethan hesitated before following her. He couldn't help but feel that this was the point of no return. As soon as Ethan crossed the threshold, the door slammed, shut behind him with a loud bang. He spun around, but the darkness swallowed everything, leaving them both in complete blackness. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he felt completely disoriented. "Lily? What's going on?" he asked, his voice shaking. He fumbled for his phone in his pocket, desperate to break the silence. But before he could take it out, a light flickered on in the corner of the room, revealing a large rectangular table at the center, covered in papers and files. Lily didn't respond immediately. She stepped forward, walking toward the table, with a sense of purpose. Her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. Ethan followed closely, his eyes scanning the room, trying to take in every detail. As they approached the table, Lily finally spoke. "It's all here, Ethan. Everything." She gestured to the scattered papers, the maps, and the various files that were strewn across the table. The truth about the sketchbooks, the truth about the people who are after them, the truth about who I really am. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's going on, Lily? You've been lying to me from the start, haven't you?" Lily turned to face him, her expression hardening. "Yes," she admitted. "I haven't been completely honest with you, Ethan. But you have to understand I didn't have a choice. I was being watched. The people behind all of this, those who are after the sketchbooks, they know everything. They've been controlling everything from the beginning." Ethan's mind raced as he tried to piece everything together. "The sketchbooks? I thought they were just valuable pieces of art. Why are they so important? Why are they worth killing for?" Lily looked down at the table, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the documents. "It's not just about the money, Ethan. The sketchbooks are part of something much bigger. They contain designs, blueprints for weapons, for machines, things that could change the balance of power in the world, and those who want them will stop at nothing to get their hands on them." Ethan stared at her, the weight of her words crashing down on him. "You're saying these sketchbooks? They're not just art. They're dangerous?" Lily nodded. "Yes. They were never meant to be sold. They were meant to be hidden, kept safe from the wrong people. And now, because of you, they're out in the open. They've already started to use the information from the sketches to build things, to create weapons. And they're not going to stop until they have all of them." Ethan took a step back, feeling the full weight of everything he had been dragged into. He had thought the sketches were just an innocent part of the story, a way to make a quick profit. But now, The true gravity of the situation was clear. He wasn't just involved in some petty crime. He was in the middle of an international conspiracy, one that could change the world. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" Ethan demanded. "Why did you make me steal the sketchbooks for you?" Lily's expression softened for a brief moment. "I didn't want you involved in all of this. But when I found out that you had the chance to get close to the people who had the sketches, I knew I had to act. I needed your help, Ethan. I couldn't do it alone." There was a long pause, and for a moment, they both stood there in the silence, the weight of the truth between them. But before Ethan could speak again, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them, and a figure stepped into the room. Ethan's blood ran cold as he recognized the man who had been following them all this time, the one who had been working in the shadows, pulling the strings, the man who was responsible for everything. Lily. The man's voice was smooth, almost amused. "You didn't think you could keep all of this to yourself, did you?" He stepped into the light, his face illuminated by the faint glow from the overhead lamps. "You've made a mess, and now it's time to clean it up." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. He knew this was the moment everything would change. There would be no more running, no more secrets, no more lies. This was it, the final confrontation. "You shouldn't have come here, Ethan," the man continued, his smile widening. "But I have to admit, you've been more useful than I expected. You got the sketchbooks after all." Lily's face had gone pale, and her hands trembled slightly. She turned to Ethan. "You have to get out of here. Now. He's not just after the sketchbooks. He's after us. Both of us." Ethan's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. He couldn't run. He couldn't hide. He had to face this head on. "Why, Lily?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "Why all the deception? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Lily's eyes flickered to the man, and then back to Ethan. "Because I didn't know who I could trust. But I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted you to be a part of this." The man laughed darkly. "It's too late for that now." He pulled out a gun from his jacket, the cold metal gleaming in the low light. "Now, it's time for the final move." Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding in his ears. He had been backed into a corner, and now there was no escaping the truth, no escaping the consequences of his actions. But then, just as the man moved toward him, a loud crash interrupted the moment, followed by the sound of heavy boots stomping through the door. "Freeze!" a voice shouted from behind. Ethan turned to see a group of armed officers storming into the room, their guns aimed directly at the man. The final confrontation had come, but it was not Ethan's fight to finish alone. The game was over. The sketchbooks, were no longer a weapon in the hands of those who sought power, and Ethan realized that the truth, however painful, had set them all on a different path. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The storm had finally passed, but the aftermath was just beginning. Ethan stood in the middle of the once chaotic warehouse, now eerily silent. The flashing lights of police cars outside illuminated the walls through the cracked windows. The chaos of the past few days, the lies, the secrets, the danger, had come to an unexpected conclusion. The sketchbooks were now in the hands of the authorities. The criminals had been apprehended, and the truth was no longer hidden in the shadows. Yet a new uncertainty lingered in the air. The room that had once felt like a dark trap now seemed almost mundane. Ethan rubbed his face, his mind racing. He couldn't believe what had just happened. For so long, he had been tangled in a web of lies, manipulated by people he thought he could trust. Now, standing here with the police taking control of the situation, he felt an odd mix of relief and emptiness. Lily, standing beside him, was still processing everything. The shock in her eyes had not fully faded. She had been a key part of this twisted game, but now, with everything out in the open, she had no idea what would happen next. She had betrayed Ethan in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Yet there was still a part of him that felt sympathy for her. She had been trapped, too, in a system much bigger than either of them had anticipated. The officers were busy securing the area, taking statements, and confiscating evidence. The sketchbooks, those innocuous-looking art supplies that had turned into priceless blueprints for destruction, were now safely locked away in evidence bags. Their significance, once hidden, was now clear to everyone. The weight of the knowledge they contained was immeasurable, and it was a small miracle that they hadn't fallen into the wrong hands sooner. Ethan felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Detective Carter, a grizzled man with a hardened face, standing behind him. "Good work," Carter said gruffly, giving him a nod. "You did more than I expected." Ethan didn't know what to say. For the longest time, he had thought he was just doing what was necessary to get by, trying to make a living, trying to survive. Now he realized just how far he had gone off course. The police had been one step behind, but now, thanks to his actions, they had everything they needed to bring down the criminal syndicate once and for all. Ethan had helped them expose a web of corruption, but it had come at a cost. "Yeah, well, it wasn't just me," Ethan said quietly. "Lily was involved too." Carter glanced at Lily, who was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked smaller than she ever had, as if the weight of everything had finally broken her. She had been the one to manipulate him into stealing the sketchbooks, to risk his life, to get them into the hands of dangerous people. And yet, now she seemed like a victim herself. "We'll be talking to her too," Carter said, his voice cold but not unkind. "But don't worry. We've got it under control. You did the right thing." Ethan nodded, but the words felt hollow. He wasn't sure what the right thing had been anymore. He had crossed lines he never thought he would. He had trusted Lily, more than he should have, more than she deserved. And in the end, he was left standing here, a part of something far, darker than he had ever imagined. Lily's gaze met his, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. They were the only two people left in the room, caught in an unspoken understanding. "I'm sorry," Lily said softly, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I never wanted to drag you into it. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just had the sketchbooks, it would be over." Ethan looked at her, seeing the fear and regret in her eyes. But he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She had used him. She had played him. He had been nothing more than a pawn in her game. "It's not just about the sketchbooks, Lily," Ethan said quietly. "It's about everything, about all the lies and the games people play with each other. You're right. I shouldn't have gotten involved, but neither should you." Lily swallowed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I didn't know who else to trust. They said they'd help me. They promised me everything if you just what?" Ethan interrupted, his frustration bubbling over. "If you just handed me over to them? If you just lied to me and let me walk into this mess?" She recoiled at his words, but Ethan didn't care. He wasn't angry at her, not really. He was angry at himself for not seeing the truth sooner, for falling for her story, for being so blind to everything that was happening around him. He could have walked away at any time, but he didn't. He had kept going, trying to make sense of the chaos, and now it had all come crashing down. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Lily said again, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, though it didn't feel like enough. He didn't know what he wanted from her, what he needed to hear. The apology didn't feel genuine. It was just words. And maybe that was all it ever was. Words, lies, and broken promises. Nothing more. The next few hours passed in a blur. The police processed the evidence, took statements, and escorted Lily and Ethan to separate rooms for questioning. They were thorough, but Ethan could tell they didn't trust him completely. He wasn't sure he trusted himself at this point either. Lily was taken away, but before she left, she gave him one final look. It was a mixture of regret, guilt, and something else, a sense of finality. She knew this was the last time they would speak. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. Ethan was left alone in a small room, staring out the window at the city below. He didn't know what was next for him. His life, his future. It was all uncertain now. The sketchbooks were no longer his concern. They had done their job, revealed their secrets. The criminals behind them were in custody, and the mystery had been solved. But Ethan couldn't help feeling empty. He had been caught up in something bigger than himself, something that had torn him apart. It wasn't just about the sketchbooks or the money anymore. It was about the people, the lies, the choices that led them to this point. As the door creaked open, he turned to find Detective Carter standing in the doorway. The detective didn't look at him with the same coldness as before. Instead, his gaze was more measured, almost understanding. "You're free to go," Carter said. "We've cleared everything up on your end. The sketchbooks are being returned to the rightful owner. But I have to tell you, Ethan, this doesn't end here. You're lucky. The people involved in this have a long reach, and they won't forget." Ethan nodded silently. He didn't know where he would go from here. But for the first time in a long time, he was finally ready to move forward. Maybe the past would always haunt him, but he could choose what came next. The door shut behind him, and Ethan stepped out into the hallway. The world outside was waiting. He didn't know what it held, but he was done being a part of other people's games. It was time to write his own story. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.